What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and Wonder Woman, Absolute Wonder Woman, is basically the god of war now. So this is the Absolute Wonder Woman first comic, which you guys have been begging for. And what this does is this opens up on what's called the Wild Isle of Hell. And initially it picks up with a woman named Cersei. Now, Cersei in DC Comics, I'll be quite frank, I'm not overly knowledgeable about her. Her origin has changed a lot over the years in DC Comics. As best as I can tell from just kind of poking around and trying to learn about her character, she was at one point the ruler of an island, or at least a kind of paradise that she called Aea. Apparently, she had killed her husband and ultimately was exiled to this lone island because of that. But again, her origins shifted a lot over the years. And in reality, it's not overly important because she's not really the main focus of this story. In fact, it really is just kind of designed to show what it looks like when Diana herself is just kind of raised in hell. And so what ends up happening is that because the sun never shines in this place, that suddenly Apollo arrives, right? The messenger of the Greek gods. And Apollo drops Wonder Woman off to her. Now, these are where things get really interesting here, because traditionally you guys are aware of the fact that Wonder Woman is of the island Themyscira, that she's an Amazon, that whole history. What's really cool about this is it really feels like Kelly Thompson is drawing a little bit on like Greg Rucka's DC Rebirth run, right? Where you guys learned, or where we all learned that like Wonder Woman had never actually been back to Themyscira and all that kind of stuff. It was all an illusion in her head and everything like that. At least that seemed to be the case. It was a phenomenal run, right? Greg Rucka, that guy's got his finger on the pulse of Wonder Woman, but so does Kelly Thompson's son, because when Apollo drops Diana off, literally Cersei asks, like, why would you bring a baby here, right? Like, what's the point of doing something like this? Like, this is a place of punishment. What could this baby possibly have done to deserve this kind of punishment? This baby is Diana, Princess of Themyscira. She is the last of the Amazons, and she has been taken from them by my father Zeus as punishment for their crimes against the gods. Her home is now hell. You are her warden. She may never again be reunited with her Amazon sisters, and they will be imprisoned for eternity when their service to my father ends. And you may never say the word Amazon again. And so literally Apollo opens his mouth, right, as the messenger of Zeus, and the voice of Zeus emerges simply saying, from here forth, the word Amazon is banned. So I decree. And in fact, it's so extreme that Cersei cannot say the word. Now, the intention here is that because Cersei cannot say the word Amazon, the word will, of course, never be taught to Diana, because you can't teach what you don't know. And if you can't speak the word, she can never learn the word. And so the question that Cersei's kind of left asking here is like, this is hell. Like, what if it dies in this place? And the response of Apollo, the gods don't care, right? This is where she belongs now for however long she is, right? Until she basically dies. And that's where things are kind of cool, because what ends up happening is Cersei takes her in and Cersei raises her. But the big kicker about this is that there are these almost kind of like Hercules elements in this story, which is one of the reasons why I love what Kelly Thompson does, right? Like in the Trials of Hercules, right? The 12 labors of Hercules. One of the things that happens is that he and his twin brother are attacked by a snake, or really a couple snakes, and Hercules grabs them both and chokes them to death. In this story, Wonder Woman just like grabs the serpent and just sends it flying, right? Just throws it. But it's one of these things where it's designed to kind of show that she is this almost Herculean type character in terms of the role that she will play. And in reality, right, like when you look at Wonder Woman as a character in DC Comics, there are incredible similarities between her character and the character of Hercules. And so as Diana's here as a baby, she's kind of learning the nature of this place, in the sense that like a small little dragon approaches her, and initially it kind of breathes like little baby dragon fire. But ultimately, like Diana picks it up, kisses it, and her mother says, right, like she's going to learn the hard way with that one. He'll singe off all her hair next time. And it's one of those things where, because this is a place of testing and this is a place of torment, there are hard lessons to learn here. Now, a lot of these lessons are kind of learned off panel. We don't necessarily see them, but the bigger question that we're kind of left asking here, which hopefully Kelly Thompson will answer in due time, what happened with the Themyscirans and Zeus? What transpired, right? Because for the most part, it's kind of like an alliance between the Amazons of Themyscira and Zeus himself. And honestly, depending on what era of comics you're reading, the other Greek gods as well. For example, like in the post-crisis landscape, right after Crisis on Infinite Earths, one of the things we learned was that Themyscira and the women on it, that they were basically just clay bodies that were fashioned by the gods. The souls that inhabit them were women that had been killed over history by men, and they would be reincarnated. They'd be selected, right, which one could appear, but they would be reincarnated in those physical bodies. Now, of course, that origins changed a lot, and there's all kinds of adjustments that have been made since, the late 1980s. But the fact is, right, like something happened here, and I'm really excited to find out what it was. But what we get is this really, really cool monologue, right, from Cersei, where she kind of talks about everything that's happening and explaining, right, what this entire situation's like. And she says, plenty of things tried to kill her, at least us. But there was no overwhelming force of creatures bent on her destruction as I'd feared, and she had a quality that softened even the most treacherous beasts. And I don't just mean all little creatures and demons and lost souls that drifted to her. How you fall in love with a child is by raising it. And so you switch over to this conversation, right, where in effect, Wonder Woman's really just kind of being taught magic here, right? As she says, like, this boy is hurting this tree. I don't like it. And her mother says, that's part of the lesson, Diana. And the question's asked, why doesn't the tree understand what's happening? And the response of her mother is, maybe it does, and it simply accepts it. And Diana responds by saying, but it's all dead, Mom. And that's what her mother says. It just looks dead, darling. We can get it back. It just needs love. And that's where Diana adds in magic, and her mother says, well, yes, everything needs magic. And it's a really fascinating lesson there, because there is this almost kind of like childlike philosophy in the sense that if you are attacked by a thing, then it would make sense that you would try to defend yourself against that thing. And really, that's just human nature, right? I mean, for the most part, you don't just kind of sit around letting yourself be attacked by things, right? You defend yourself, fight or flight, that kind of thing. But the idea that this tree in this lesson is just kind of allowing itself to be attacked is kind of representative of the idea of like predestination, right? Accepting one's fate, recognizing its fate in the greater cosmos of existence, and knowing that everything that dies comes back again. Now, it may very well be referencing an actual Greek mythology story. I don't know what that story would be. I'm not super knowledgeable about Greek mythology, but what you do is you transition over to the lesson that Diana's learning about the nature of the word Amazon. And she says, Mother, there is a word. And the response of her mother is, okay. And she says, do you know this word? And the response of her mother is, what is it? You have not said it. And Diana says, I'm not sure that it's a real word. And the response of her mother is, it's real if you say it. And so Diana's kind of like, okay, perhaps. And so this is kind of hinting on like the word Amazon. Now, one of the cool things about this is that over time, it's going to be more and more of a pull towards Diana. This idea that her being an Amazon is an intrinsic part of herself. And it's a really, really cool kind of like philosophical idea that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But one of the things that goes on is that like basically Wonder Woman is kind of like taming this, three-headed tiger thing that has like a scorpion tail, and it's like, be reasonable, right? Like, you don't have to die today, like that kind of thing. The warrior's lesson, right? The whole warrior's thing. I love the warrior element of Diana. But again, she's also learning magic here, right? That kind of thing. And so at that point, you switch over to this whole kind of discussion between herself and her mom. And she's like, I want to ask you about that word again, right? And she's like, okay, like I thought you were going to ask that question. And Diana's just kind of like, this is very important to me. Like, I really want to know about this. But ultimately, Diana's inability to speak this word, or perhaps just the nature of the word itself, terrifies her because she doesn't understand what it means. And that's really the root of fear, right? A lack of understanding. I don't know what will happen, therefore I'm afraid of doing this thing, right? If we knew the outcome of everything we ever did and everything we ever said, fear wouldn't exist, right? Because we would know exactly what to do to avoid the unknown. And so that's why she's like, I am afraid of this thing. And the response of her mother is, no, you're not afraid of a word. You're afraid of the change that saying it will bring. Because if you say this word, you know in your heart of hearts, it will change everything you know about yourself and everything you know about this place. And so Diana asks, like, how can I know a word without ever having heard it? How can it beat in my chest so powerfully without knowing what it means? And the response of her mother is, say the word, Diana, say it, and know it is what you are. And Diana says, Amazon. And it's this just like phenomenal moment, right? Because it's her officially coming into her own. Now, there is a little bit of a continuation of that segment, but it actually coincides with what's happening while Diana's on Earth. And so that's what we're going to switch over to, because what goes on here is that you actually pick up with basically this kind of like unidentified flying object kind of arriving on Earth, right? And that whole segment that we've talked about basically took place before all the stuff that we talk about now. And so sometime between Diana officially saying the word Amazon and the present, she had arrived on Earth, right? She had literally come here as arguably a savior, if you want to see it that way. The cool thing here is that she's literally riding Pegasus, right? Just like the old school days in DC Comics, but Pegasus is a skeleton, and it's horrifying, but dope at the same time. Like, Wonder Woman as a character has never looked better than this in DC Comics, to be honest with you guys. Like, she looks so incredible. And so what she does is she arrives here and starts fighting what initially looked like parademons or some variant of parademons. Now, they're not, right? Of course, parademons are basically the agents of Darkseid, but when you're powerful enough to create a whole universe, you don't really need to send in parademons to conquer worlds. And so the result of this is that Wonder Woman kind of helps humanity to a bit, dealing with this, threat to a degree, kind of quelling it, and using magic to effectively knock them unconscious. But that's when she approaches a soldier and she's like, "Are you in charge here?" And he just kind of fumbles a bit and she's like, "Okay, that's a no, right? Your lack of confidence shows it's a clear no. Where's your superior?" And he points her in the direction of like, where her superior is. But she tells them, like, these are not the main threat, right? One, they're unconscious, right? They're not defeated. And two, they are a representation of something bigger that is coming. And in that moment, this just gigantic creature emerges and comes out of this kind of obelisk, and then immediately begins the process of like talking to Wonder Woman, right? And literally she tells them, like, "You're not welcome here, Harbinger Prime," right? Like, "This world will defend itself. I stand before you with the mythical Athena blade, forged by Hephaestus himself. It is more than capable of sending you to your maker. Go back to wherever you came from and tell whatever you herald that you are mistaken. This world is protected." And it simply just says, "But it is not." And like immediately goes on the attack. And I gotta tell you guys, man, like, the art's a little wonky. It's cool. It is a little wonky, but I do think that this would make like an amazing like TV show or movie or something. Some kind of like media would be incredible for this whole thing, right? Like, this giant creature, but it is not. And just like attacks Wonder Woman, right? Like, it's just amazing. Now, ultimately it gets the upper hand on her, right? Just like firing off heat vision. It's the one thing that always frustrates her, because she's just like, every single time, it always seems to happen. And he's just like, "Harbingers, rise," right? "Sow chaos and prepare the way." Now, there is a reason why all this is happening, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But Wonder Woman goes on the attack again, right? And it says like, "We warned you," right? Like, "We will destroy you." But seemingly it can't. So that's when you switch over to the segment, right, that we just ended, where Wonder Woman says Amazon for the first time, because she's kind of flashing back to this whole upbringing that she had. Right. And so she's talking to her mom and she's like, "What does it mean, mother, the word Amazon?" And she says, "It's simply what you are, Diana. You are an Amazon." And she's like, "What was that?" And she's like, "What was that?" Right? "What was an Amazon?" And her mother simply says, "When Apollo first brought you to me, he banned me from ever saying that word." And she's like, "Why? Why would they do that?" And her mother's like, "Why indeed, my darling girl? That's the question." And so literally Diana's just like, "They don't want me to know that I'm an Amazon. They took me from them and tried to stop me from knowing what I was. Why?" And that's what her mother says, because the Amazons had a job to do. They protected the world above from the oldest of monsters, which want only to feast on it. Without the Amazons, the world above never makes it this far. Without them, maybe this is the end. Or perhaps you will say your name again and become what you were always meant to be. And it's just this incredibly powerful moment, because she's like, "Amazon, I'm an Amazon." And her mother's like, "Again." And she's like, "Amazon." And she's like, "Again." And she's like, "Amazon," right? And it's just like the coolest thing, because she walks up on Harbinger Prime with what's probably the dopest monologue that I think we've ever gotten from Wonder Woman, right? She's like, "I am Diana of Themyscira, last of the Amazons, daughter of Circe, princess of hell, witch of the wild isle, and you will not have this world while I still draw breath. Not only that, it looks like she's wielding the lasso of truth, but it's red, not gold. So I want to know what this thing does. But yeah, man, you guys were right, dude. Absolute Wonder Woman is amazing. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.